public health, but I'll tell you.
Yes, they get mailed. They get emailed.
It will be
CME. But that's fine. But I mean, they're going to be emailed to us
Yes.
after. Okay.
All right. So, like she said, I'm Patrick Frasier. I'm a research nurse manager with the cardiovascular clinical trials unit. And we're just going to go over that kind of the end of study, wrapping things up. Because a lot of stuff can come up late. Once we get into these fallouts, sometimes these visits really stretch out and it's easy to miss things. It's easy to kind of get stuck with a whole lot of work on the backside. So when we're notified of a study closing, which is either the study has met their enrollment goals, sometimes they're closed for non-efficacy by the FDA. If it's an investigator-initiated trial, they may be closed because we have the information and the investigators are ready to write an article on it, write a paper on it. So once we know that this is closed, we ensure that all the subject visits have been completed. So kind of what my thing for all the trials is your schedule of events. For every study you have running, in your protocol should be a schedule of events. If it's a drug trial, you got a protocol. If it's an investigator-initiated trial where they have just HSPs sometimes or some small amount of information, we need to make one. Coordinators need to make a schedule of events, which would just be a table with visits and study activities and check marks. So you can glance at these and kind of have this beside you to look and keep up with. So if this is a study that's stretched out a long time and you know that completing these subject visits may be an issue, what I would recommend is I've gone to print out schedule of events for every patient and go back and look through and compare these visits to make sure we hit them. The times that come in, especially with device trials, we end up with some of these studies being 5-year follow-ups, 10-year follow-ups, and they come only every 6 months. And it's a lot easier, it sounds ridiculous to miss a study visit, but when you have 20, 30 patients in a study that's been going on since before you ever worked here, it can get easy to miss all these 6-month visits. Review these. Look at everything before we go to close the trial up, because everyone else is going to be. Because if we don't look through it, either way the sponsor is going to come and comb through everything that we've had, especially when you have stuff in these electronic data systems. The sponsor is going to send data management to comb back through this stuff that may have been there for 2 years, 3 years, and we need to have as much up to date before they go through it as we can. And then update the subject's contact information and research. So you may have had a patient that has completed the study and not had any visits for a while until the study closes. And we need to make sure that we have up-to-date information just in case we have any new information that comes out, or if we have a blinded study and they release the information on who got what. So this kind of goes back to that. What's not the end of study? So anytime anyone refers to end of study, it is the end of the complete study. It's closing down. It's not end of study at our site or end of treatment. So depending on the trial, we can have, these patients would get off of study drug or whatever your study treatment is. They're still continuing on, and then in follow-up can last for a long amount of time. And we may even be done with all our patients out of follow-up, but that's not end of study yet. Until the sponsor decides that is end of study, until they've met their endpoints, that's when we hit end of study. So you may have not seen them talk to a patient for a year, sometimes 6 or 8 months, and it's not in the study yet. Some of the ways that this can stretch out, we have trials where there is no end of study yet. So we have patients that have been in study for 8 years with follow-up that is not ending until they get FDA approval. So we're just kind of forever waiting. And so we have to keep up with these, and the study will not end until they get approved. We have some of the trials, industry trials, they'll set up where they have a extra kind of floating visits. So you say all the patients could be done with 48 weeks of treatment or after 48 weeks of follow-up, but some of them may need 52 or on and on until we get the endpoints. So sometimes in the protocols that last visit is not as well identified depending on what the aims of the trial is and where they're at in it. Oh, you don't have my paper, do you? All right. So study closeout procedures will begin after the final study visit is completed. Usually with sponsor trials especially, a monitor will come out after our site has had the last visit, and we'll do a kind of pre-closeout, so this final monitoring visit to sum up everything. And then there'll be this batch of time before the entire study closes, which they'll come back out. Make sure that all final subject reimbursements are completed for travel. Again, one of the things that will close down with your study closing down is our accounts. So we have to make sure all our bills are paid, all of our subject reimbursements are sent out. and then update the subject status in the EMR, SiteMinder, Power Trials. This is one that's really easily forgotten, and a lot of times we've had problems where subjects will be in studies and there's no documentation of that in the EMRs. But in Impact, we have a research note. So if you can use Impact, you can always add a documentation. A research note is an option, and we can write a note with the IRB number and this trial that they're in, and then make sure to go back and write another note that this subject completed this trial. SiteMinder, when you put patients in SiteMinder, you associate them with a trial, and if you don't unassociate them when they're done, if you don't close this, it leaves them open in there. So we can run across patients all the time that may be in 3 or 4 trials in SiteMinder, and they're really maybe in none, actually. They've closed out. So we need to go back at the end, and that's some of these things that are really easy to forget and to think about from the coordinator side. And documenting the notes in the source notes. So once you've talked to the patient knows that this is the end of the trial. You've had this, write this down in a progress note, which kind of goes along with everything. We write down everything we do in the source. So just make sure at the end of the trial that we're having that conversation with the patient. A lot of these, like I said, these long-lasting trials, they lose count of where they're at on the study. You know that they're at visit whatever month they're at. They might not know. They just come back when you tell them to. They come back when you call them. And so it's good to keep them informed to make sure that they're aware that this is kind of where we're stopping now. So query resolution. This is the worst part of ending studies. This is what will happen over and over again. And this is what takes so much time from a coordinator at the end of the trial. Query results when an error is identified when validation checks are implemented to detect a result that does not make sense. So monitors can physically come out or can monitor our studies remotely. But what all these studies have that have the EDCs and any of these drug trials will have, or any industry trials will have, is data management teams. And they'll come through when it starts getting to the end of the study, and they will do continual sweeps of the data. And they will query things that have been in these systems for 5 years. They will query visits that were done however long ago because they are just sweeping, cleaning data. So when you know we're close to an end, and we've had this, we need to be looking at these EDCs, checking these systems on a weekly basis. At this point in the trial, when our patients are out of the study, our visits are really stretched out, you may not have a need to go to this specific EDC for 3 or 4 months. But we need to be checking these because if not, you're going to come back with a lot of queries. And like I think Lee had mentioned, query resolution is tied to site payment a lot of times. They say you have to have queries resolved in a certain amount of time in the contract. So that's something you need to know and be able to check at these time frames to get these queries cleaned up at the end of the trial especially. This is a critical part of end of study activities because without, clean data is all it is in the trial. Without that, and if data management has any questions, typically these are not medical people at all. They just know if this doesn't look right in their spreadsheet, they're gonna query you. So you're gonna get a lot of them that don't make sense. You're just gonna get a series of batches where yesterday there was none, today there's 40. And that can happen with some of these late trials. Also, it's important to know that the sponsors expect investigators to sign and approve the case report forms. So as an investigator's role is to overlook the trial, to have oversight over the entire trial. Coordinators are the ones who are in the EDCs entering. Typically, investigators won't be in there very frequently. But anytime these close out and anytime the sponsor warrants it, whatever the sponsor dictates, the PIs will need to log in and review the case report forms that these match the source, that these are accurate, and sign off on them. Yeah. And sometimes that can hold up. Sponsors will hold up things if we can't get that signature in. So one more time, look back at the end of the trial. Have all the specimens been sent to designated labs? So this is particularly important with core labs, which a lot of trials will use some core labs somewhere, and a lot of them will back ship with especially genetic markers. Things that aren't going to be resulted. So a lot of times these trials will hold on to blood for future research, and they're going to be back shipped to a core lab. So maybe Outreach or CCTS, whoever's got them, will draw the blood, hold it, and then ship them all at the end of a certain amount of time. At the end of a study, we need to go back and check these labs. It's very easy for these to get kind of lost, not shipped sometimes in the labs, or what gets stuck waiting on a back shipment. So that's what this is talking about. Go back and make sure that we know if we have shipments that we were waiting on them to send, that we're aware of where those are at. Have they been sent off? Because after the study closed, if we don't send them off, we didn't get them. It doesn't matter. Has all the drug been reconciled? That's another big deal for the study coordinators to be involved in, is looking back at this and making sure that our drug counts, and sponsors will dictate how they want you to take care of these, but if you're doing investigational drugs, they're going to want pill counts, they're going to want you to have all this information, and it's got to all match up from where your monitor's at. So generally we'll have 2 sets of logs on these. The pharmacy has a log for their distribution to you as the coordinator, and the coordinator has logs for your distribution to the subjects. So these need to be double checked to make sure. It's something that should be ongoing throughout the whole trial, but it's something to look back at. Have updates, AEs and SAEs, and then con meds. So these 2 things can really cause a lot of problems late trial as well. Sometimes you get studies that collect all these adverse events, and you have had a list of tons from some patients, and many of them are not relevant, but they need to be entered into the EDC. And again, this is one of those things that's easy to forget at the end of the trial. Make sure your adverse events are uploaded in the EDCs, and make sure that if they were treated with a medicine, the dates between adverse events and concomitant medications match. So that's another big thing at the end of the study that they go back and look at, is if you had a patient with headache as an adverse event on the 24th, and the treatment was medication, and your concomitant medication, the Tylenol, which were to treat the headache, if the date is off, it's going to query everything. And then you're going to have to go back and figure out, well, pull it apart, look at the notes, when did this happen, what's correct. So that's another big place that coordinators can get caught in, with having one piece of misdocumentation, one transcription error can cause a lot of confusion. So for the regulatory activities, the study cannot be closed to the IRB until all study activities and any possible queries are resolved. Again, if this is investigator initiated, this is a much simpler process. If the PI is here, after everything is done, after the analysis has been done, it's closed. If it's a sponsored, everything is driven by them. So sponsored trials will let us know when everything closes. We'll have closeout visits. They won't close you out if your database is not up to date. If your queries aren't resolved, they won't come and close us out. So once that point, the sponsor will notify us, and then we can close it out. So again, this is just kind of a review of these regulatory activities, training a lot, making sure these logs are done. The big thing with these logs at the end that we can check back for: headers, initials, and dates. Sometimes those things are missed very easily. And that's the one big things that I see typically missed on these logs. Are these put in there right? This is again, we go through this. So all regulatory, this is just regulatory looks. Again, some of this stuff is for your information, just as a checklist. Make sure that we have all versions of the protocol been approved. Make sure all the IRB approvals. This is just kind of regulatory binder stuff. Make sure all these versions are in here. If it's found, you can get them. Make sure these regulatory binders are up to date. It's good to have, just like we're auditing our charts at end of study, we need to audit our regulatory binders as well. So on the sponsors part, they'll collect these CRFs. They're typically now electronic. It's very rare that we have paper CRFs, but if they do, they'll be collecting them. You can be mailing them in. They can be coming to get them. But we always need a copy of the CRF, and then we need to have all source documents on our site present. So we need to make sure that we have everything there to back up everything that's in these CRFs. And then ensure our regulatory and financial is complete. So this is, again, just things that these sponsor activities may do, just to kind of let you ready. Again, the same kind of thing. For the ClinicalTrials.gov is closing. If it's on ClinicalTrials.gov, basically, if it's a sponsor study, they'll close it out. So they'll let ClinicalTrials.gov know. Ethically, it is important to notify the subjects of all study results. So that's why we have to, from the beginning, get that contact information from them, especially in blinded trials, that we'll be able to call them back and tell them what they received. Did you receive placebo? Did you receive active agent? And then a lot of these blinded trials will roll over into open enrollment trials where they will get the active drug. So that's why it's vital to have up-to-date contact information with them. Also, in most all informed consents, it says if any relevant medical findings are made, we'll let you know. A lot of times with your investigator-initiated trials, we may not have anything to tell them. A lot of times with some of the device trials, we may not have any, post-market analysis, we may not have anything to tell them, but we need to know that, especially for anything that's blinded. So, assess your study at the closure was our research question answered. So how did our endpoints go? Did we find out whether it's an efficacy, a safety trial, or if it's a whatever we're looking for, which is in our study goals, did we answer this? What could we have done to help prevent loss of outcome measure data? So where do we fall short in collecting this data? And that's the best time to look back at these, not only for site, but also for feasibility. So along with X, where did it go? Will it be in a study like this? Did we meet our goals? This is one of the most important parts of study closure for sites. The reason is that we need to know, if we didn't do well at the study, is it because of training and because of personnel, or is this because we don't have the population for this trial? We don't have the means for this trial. This is tremendous in feasibilities and in looking at future trials to take, because nothing hurts. Nothing is less productive than opening trials that don't enroll, or the opening trials that we don't have the ability to follow through with. And so sometimes everything looks, we can read over the criteria, we can look at our populations, and it really looks good, but in practice, we don't have these patients. And that's one of those things that can happen, and we try to prevent it, but sometimes we don't see it. So once we complete a study, if we did well, that's great, and we look at what we did, but if we didn't do well, if we didn't meet our goals, especially with enrollment, why? And that's one of the big things for sites to ask and to see, what did we miss on this? Was there things we could have done better? Were we not in clinic enough seeing the patients? Were we not, patient retention? Did we not contact these patients enough? What do we do that lost this? And is it a population issue? So what did our protocol deviations look like? Is the next thing. Invariably there will be protocol deviations from time to time on some of these trials. There's humans in the study and there's humans around the study. So there will be errors on maybe not on our site, but on, you rely on clinical nursing staff or clinical schedulers, people who are not related to the research. There can always be deviations. But what can we do to eliminate these? The ultimate thing with this is, if you're a study coordinator, your job is to coordinate these trials. So there's always something that can be done on our side to help eliminate these deviations. It can't be said, it can't be acceptable looking back that clinical staff didn't do this. It's going to happen from time to time, but if there's a trend there's something that we could be doing more on our side. If we're having a problem with things getting ordered correctly, with nursing staff on a floor or nursing staff in a clinic not getting stuff done, we need to be there because we coordinate the entire trials. That's what our job is. So what extra effort can we put in to avoid mistakes on anyone's side? And then in the publishing, was this positive or negative? How did the data turn out? All right, so the FDA audits. This can happen, and it's a big deal. It's kind of a pain if we have it. They're not terrible, but it's a hassle. Being ready from the day the study begins. I'm sure Lee talked about a lot of these intra-study activities. That's what makes a difference. We had, I think, 2 FDA audits in the last couple of years for studies that ended before I was here and before we had no one that were here when the studies were there. So the FDA came and pulled study out of the PI was gone, all the nurses that were involved in it were gone, and we're pulling complete trials out of storage to work with these FDA audits. And it is a lengthy process, and it can't happen. So it's being ready from the word to go is what makes the difference. And that's why we're so careful with these documentations. That's why the monitors are there all the time. That's why we have the data management. This bothering us is for these FDA audits. They only audit drug and device studies. So they regulate oversight of regulations, control, and enforcement of clinical research. So they look over to make sure that we're doing research right. This is this act that gives them the right to do this. So there's 2 types of audits: routine inspections and for-cause inspections. Routine inspections are just triggered they account for over 80% of these inspections each year. They didn't have a sentinel event causing it. But people who enroll the most subjects are definitely most likely to be inspected. So if you have a study and you are top enrollers, it is fair to expect FDA audit. Especially if there's a lot of sites that didn't enroll well. What's the difference? Why did you do so well? It's just to check and make sure. For-cause inspection, some reasons if a site has way more trials than they think we should, if we're conducting trials outside of the specialization, some of these things, this shouldn't happen realistically. Any evidence that an investigator has had a significant financial investment and interest in the product, or having too many patients. So in an FDA audit, they will verify data. They look at source docs, CRFs, database, and final report. Must ensure the subject protection, verify compliance. So before the inspection, that's the time. During the inspection, it's the test, man. It doesn't matter what you do now because it's all there. Before the inspection from day one, make sure that we're organized. And another thing that's very helpful is make sure that there's a clean path of data. If I was to pick up your source doc and look at it, make sure that it all ties together well. If you have medical history in there, it needs to be in chronological order. Things need to match. Label. We have a standardized source charts that we use. We have 10 coordinators at our group, and we span from all sides of cardiology, EP to intervention, heart failure, and general cardiac. But we have a standardized source charts that we use. We have the same tabs. We all have the same tabs. And within those tabs, I say tab everything else. Tab anything that needs to know. So if you have AEs and there's documentation of your medical history, tab it. Put extra, make it so that anyone can pull this open and look at it cleanly. Because that saves us. Because when monitors and when auditors have to go back and they're scrounging for information, it's a lot easier for that to get confused. It's a lot easier for stuff to be mistaken when it's not well organized. And that's something that gets done a lot. I see that is that our source charts are like this, our source charts. We put the information in the data system, but these are ours. These need to be clean and perfectly match what's in there. Also, the big thing here, ask for assistance. The department and all this, the sponsor would love to help you on these. They want to know about these FDA audits, and they'll send auditors, they'll send monitors out to go through the data to help you clean up everything before the FDA gets here. So the sponsors can be very helpful during these audits, before the audits. So again, prepare. This is what you don't want, is FDA findings. If you ever get these, every study you will ever apply for will ask about your FDA findings. They will ask about the investigator, and they will ask about the site. Have you been on every site selection survey I've ever seen this? Have you been audited by the FDA? Were there significant findings? So we really want to stay out of these. Of course, inclusion. Are we, enrolling the right people, randomizing the right people? These are the kind of things that, again, this should never happen if you're conducting research correctly. Like failure to maintain adequate, accurate records, changing data. None of this should be a problem in any trial. Report AEs and SAEs. One thing that I do want to point out is failure to document consent process. That's one that can get us. It's easy to do. So consenting, especially for nurses and physicians moving from a clinical world to a research world, consenting is a lot simpler on the other side. But when we're doing investigational treatments, investigational procedures and drugs, informed consenting process is huge. And I know that's been something that's probably been mentioned 1,000 times today. But we use, and I think, and sponsors and auditors have loved it, is our checklist. We have a checklist that we go over for hours to make sure that we're hitting all these, hitting all our points on our informed consent. So whenever there's an informed consent documented in any charts, there's a checklist on top of it that says if we gave them the 24-hour time or if we had waivers. It says did we read it to the patient, we gave the patient time, we answered any questions. It goes through our consenting process. And that documentation there is just an additional document that allows them to see that we went through the correct consenting processes. So this is what can happen post-audit, warning letters, and when the final report comes out, you'll get a report from it, and then when it's publicly available. There can be, after the inspection, you can have no actions, you can have suggestions, rejection of data, rejection of the entire study, all the way down to debarment or prosecution of the investigator. Here's an audit checklist. This link is a really good form. So if you knew that you were at a point getting an audit, this is a checklist to kind of look through to make sure you're prepared. So they're going to look at a lot of stuff that you could miss, that we could miss. They're going to be really in depth with it. They're going to be there for days, and they're going to look at everything. So do this checklist, and it was nice to have. Always be prepared. The key points of this, it could happen tomorrow. When notified of the FDA audit, let people know. Let our department, let whoever's working in research with you, management know. Let the sponsors that can help, IRB, anyone that can assist us to make sure that we can do quality assurance before they come out here. We need to talk to them. Document everything and be accommodating to the FDA auditors. One thing to note is they can pull, when we brought them in, you kind of want to put them in, they need to have their dedicated room. They don't need to be in your office. They don't need to be where there's any other study documentation at, because they can see that. They can view anything that's in there. So when we had them, when they came, we had the FDA audits. We had a conference room set up and scheduled all day for them, with no, it was just what they needed. Everything they needed was in there. They had their internet access, and we had a coordinator with them at all times. We had a coordinator sit with them to help them with any questions. Now, we didn't know anything about the trials, again, because nobody who was at the trial was there, but to help them with whatever they needed, we had somebody there with them. So who's involved in misconduct? Everybody can be, anyone involved can be involved in misconduct. So innocent ignorance is the misconduct of uninformed kind. This is still really not, this is no excuse. The issues that we have are, this can be corrected with training, and again, from the head end of the study, this can be, did this fall on training that we underwent, or did this fall on your lack of understanding the protocol? When we're doing these trials, especially drug trials, you got a whole book of stuff that tells you exactly how to do the study. So we need to know it. We have our protocol there that tells us exactly how things go through. We need to understand the compliance. But innocence, ignorance is not. It may have been intentional, but it is not. It's not done deliberately to cause harm, to deceive anything. The biggest times that we see this: discarding source documents after the accurate transcription. So if you write anything on a document, that's source. So maybe you wrote something wrong. It's a transcription error, and throw it away to start a new page. That's an example of that, of innocent ignorance. Intentional is you meant to do it. Surprising sloppiness is due to inaction. Again, this is another way that misconduct can happen. This is intentional or unintentional. The noncompliance is usually repeated. It's missing something. It's not reporting adverse events that you didn't think mattered. It's doing something that you. It's not doing something. It's being lazy about it. Other types of misconducts. Again, all these things you should know are wrong. This is not any surprise to anyone. You can see in this 6-year gap from 1999 to 2005 how the staff work burden has increased. 67%. Total procedures per protocol has increased 65%. So protocols are becoming much more complex. And this is just in the 6-year gap. 11 years ago. And enrollment rate is declining, retention rate is declining. So this is an era of complexity for these trials as companies look for more and more specific uses for their medications. We get more and more specific patient populations we're looking for, and we get more and more specific procedures that need to be done to identify these. We get lengthier trials, and this kind of ties back into our FDA audits and things, because just to say that what we're doing now in 2016 is much, much more complicated than it was just 5 or 10 years ago. It's growing at an incredible rate, and it's continuing this trend. So prosecution. This is the same stuff with any medical. If you lie, if you hide something, if you enroll false patients, you can be prosecuted. So overall, just a quick review of the end of study stuff. Maintain great files so you're ready to close the study with confidence. You should not be afraid when they come out to close a visit. Share your results. When the sponsor releases results to you, share them to the subjects. And you can live through an audit if you adhere to GCPs during the course of the study. Do you have any questions at all?
Would the number of amendments trigger an audit in a drug trial?
And they'll be not at the site, because the audits will be done on a site-by-site basis. So if they all did the sites, they may audit the trial, but they would not. It wouldn't trigger a specific site to be.
They can audit the sponsor, but not necessarily the site.
Because it would be across the board on all sites.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? All right.
If you will, just make sure you complete your post-test and your evaluations, and then you are free to go. So thank you very much, and I don't think it started reading yet, so you probably have a few minutes. Oh, well, you guys don't have a post-test. You're welcome. All right. All right. Thank you. Is everybody recessed? Oh, these? Yeah, yeah. That's not a problem. So where are you at now? What's your background? We just hired somebody about 6 months ago. She finished her PhD and she just about playing school, which she does our regulatory. So she's new to that and she's done well. So I would say like this is going into this classes that start MDP, the research training program. It's a good class. I think it's like $75 now, and it's a half a day over 6 weeks. And it's very UAB specific. So they bring in a lot of different people from different parts of the country. So talk about not just had her come just get some child or regulatory or something to see what we do. So I would say if there's somebody